Pirates of the Caribbean is a very inconsistent franchise. Each film feels completely different in style, tone, storytelling. Even between Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, which are commonly just thought of as being one big movie, there's far more inconsistencies than you'd think. What has to be the most constant aspect of this franchise is definitely escape scenes. Each movie delivers a classic escape scene which shows Jack Sparrow to be one of the most cunning, brilliant, and most deceptively intelligent cinematic characters. Now yes, not every movie has delivered equally in this aspect. The fifth movie especially sort of just felt like a pretty good Banks escape scene without really much else. But whenever Jack Sparrow was at his best as a character, we saw some of the best escape scenes put to film. Of course, this brings us to 2011's On Stranger Tides. Now, if I'm being honest, I have quite the history with this film. At first, I just thought it was okay, but I went on to call it the worst in the franchise, finding it unwatchable, and now I find it to be a bit of a guilty pleasure with nothing too terrible, but nothing really too great either. The movie has way too many boring scenes, sterile pacing, weak characters, and an overall directionless feel. Its additions made little sense, like mermaids and Blackbeard, but I still enjoyed this movie even if it was a mess. If I'm being honest, it's mostly ironic though, and besides some attachment to Captain Jack Sparrow as a character and love for the franchise, I can admit it's a pretty weak film. The good parts are understated and disparate, and they never really come together to form the excellent experience that you want this movie to be, which is sad. All of this is except for the best scene in the movie, and one of the best scenes in the entire franchise, and that is the scene when Jack meets King George II. To get to the first thing that I really love about this scene is the setting. Throughout the series, the main bad guys have been the Redcoats. During the 18th century, the British Empire wasn't really a world power yet, but they were certainly getting there, and they posed a massive threat to any pirate on the seas. The series had always shown these guys to be looming in the background, and we know in history that ultimately the pirates lose out. Beckett in the third film represents this threat, and although he is stopped by the pirate lords at the end of the movie, we know that the British are still around and kicking, and that eventually they will be out the pirates. This makes it such a natural progression to see the capital of the British Empire in this movie, London. On top of having not seen that many cities in this series, one thing I really love is that we get to see where the enemy's den is, where the nest of the beast is. And one thing I've loved about Pirates all the way through is that it can make a setting so alluring and so fleshed out, it can make you want to be there. We see carriages and tons of people, we see the dirty streets and buildings that you'd expect in a city. It feels like a city from this time period, and all those little details really flesh out what we're seeing. We're completely entrenched in the enemy's nest, which makes the situation for Jack even more hopeless. So, at the beginning of the film, Jack ultimately gets arrested and finds himself trapped in King George's castle. Throughout the movie, everyone is after the Fountain of Youth, and since Jack has the map, the British want him to help him find the fountain and lead an expedition. Historically, I like that we see some of the rivalry between the Protestant English and the Catholic Spanish with this little bit. The king himself is quite humorous, he's fat, he's pompous, and just looks ridiculous, and I just love it. He's so unsuspecting of Jack, certain that he'll never be able to escape, and this sets up the perfect escape scene, which we'll get to. I also like that Jack has some pretty witty, clever, classic lines in this scene that really show his confidence and charisma. It shows that he's really not difficult to characterize if you know what you're doing. He's a free spirit, and so he has zero respect for the king's authority, which I find to be quite funny. It's also great characterization that he can't stay still. He's constantly moving in this scene and always conversing with his body just as much as he is with his words. Johnny Depp really does a great job throughout the entire film, but this is the only scene where he feels in control. Jack isn't being lugged around by Blackbeard, he's by himself doing what he does best. We're also introduced to Barbossa in this scene, and I'm honestly really sad that they didn't take his character further in this direction between this movie and the next one. Barbossa, being the stereotypical pirate that he is, shows us his new peg leg, but that's not all that's changed. Barbossa, the man who was brought back from the dead to fight Beckett, the man who reassembled the pirate lords to awaken Calypso, the man who put his own greed away to fight for the pirate common good, has become a privateer for the British Navy. Now, I understand that some fans may see this as a revelation, as a betrayal of the character that we knew and loved from the previous films. But me, I personally love this development, and I really wish they had stuck to it, but they didn't. As I said before, it's clear to us as the audience that the golden age of piracy won't last forever. This is a theme in the previous movie that's explored, and I find this to be a natural progression of that theme. There won't be adventures forever, the corners of the map will be filled in, and pirates will disappear to be left as a memory. It's really deep stuff, and we can see that Jack is genuinely upset at how Barbossa sucks up to the king and has completely changed his character. As he says in the film, this is honestly really deep and compelling stuff. It's great character development, and it brings back some of the themes from At World's End. I really wish this film had stuck to that, and the next film for that matter as well, because honestly, it's the closest that this film comes to following up on the themes of the previous movies, but it completely misses the mark by just reversing Barbossa. I mean, it's sad, but it's supposed to be. The pirates don't win in the end, and to see the most staunch pirate in the series betray his own cause is honestly kind of amazing for this movie to accomplish. Jack is a character who never really shows any sort of extreme emotion. He's generally chilled out and always shows the appropriate emotions and reactions to every scene, and yet he seems genuinely upset and enraged that Barbossa could betray the pirate cause. He's annoyed that Barbossa sucks up to the king. And then there's this. After stealing Jack's ship in the previous movie, Barbossa had sunk it, and Jack is very upset. To Jack, the pearl represented freedom. It represented the entire pirate cause, and for Barbossa to lose it, not to go down with his ship, it greatly upsets him, and I think it's a perfect metaphor for how Barbossa has given up freedom for security, something that Jack despises. I also love Barbossa's wig. It's a clear metaphor as to how he's degraded, and I love that it leads to Jack's witty one-liner before the escape scene. All of this is without even touching on the crown jewel of this scene in this movie, Jack's escape from the king's palace. To properly understand this masterpiece of cinema and storytelling, we first have to analyze the details as they come. After Jack is arrested, he's left in a room by himself for a little while. He's in chains, stuck to a chair, and he looks around. We see a balcony that is an exit to the room and a window. Jack is already planning his escape before anything has even started. In a comical bit, he tries to steal some sort of muffin, but as the company arrives, he kicks it up, revealing a chandelier. As he speaks to the king, he gets rid of his chains by annoyingly shaking them, which leads to the king taking them off. Now, this shows Jack's brilliance as a character, that he's able to trick the enemy into thinking he's an idiot when in reality he's always 5 steps ahead. Next, he walks around a little bit. Unsuspectingly, he throws a napkin to the ground. He also positions a chair. As Barbossa comes in, we see the king's arrogance. Barbossa, having seen Jack in action before, demands that he be chained immediately, but the king is not clearly fazed. After he lunges at Barbossa, 2 guardsmen come to hold him in place. After Barbossa gives his reasoning for his defection to the king, Jack says one of the greatest one-liners before the escape scenes. The music kicks in perfectly to crescendo the epic action scene coming as Jack shocks the guards, using that shock to fire their guns off to spin the chandelier he had seen earlier. His plan is to disarm every guard in the room by masterfully kicking their guns in the air, grabbing them, and disarming them by hitting them with their own guns. Jack is able to be free to run on the table to his destination. The music lines up with the satisfying sound effects as Jack hits the guns off and then kicks a plate into the other armed guard and uses the shock of everyone to run along the table, hiding behind the chair he had positioned earlier. Just as quickly, he throws that same chair out of the window so that the next guard that chases him will fall out. But that's not it. He has a napkin that he had positioned earlier for the guard to conveniently slip on as he chases him in the shock and disarray of it all. What happens next is so satisfying that could be considered nirvana. Jack, the witty man he is, has the guard slip out of the window and pull on a curtain that will raise Jack up to the level where he can swing on the chandelier to the exit. Keep in mind, this exit he created. Nothing in this scene was given to him or contrived. He created all of this. He created the gateway that not even the audience saw coming, and yet we could see how ingenious it was. We see the shock of everyone bar Barbossa as he effortlessly escapes and makes it look like child's play, finally eating the biscuit that he had kicked up from earlier. The music in this movie overall is quite weak and unfitting, but here in this scene you just want to watch it over and over again because it fits with the action so perfectly and entirely encapsulates the reason for this movie's existence and Jack Sparrow's brilliance as a character. It's an amazing scene that the movie doesn't really capitalize on, and all really goes downhill from here. But all we're left to hear is the screams and disarray of the redcoats. Jack was in the center of their palace, and he effortlessly made the greatest escape of all time put to film. I'd like to thank you if you watched this video in its entirety. It was very fun to make, and I plan to do follow-ups. I am not a channel dedicated to this film franchise, but I very well could be in the future. Let's just see how it goes. Thank you.